Welcome back to Upside Down Influencer, where we talk about the things that we see on social media and ultimately how we, as Christ followers, can do it differently. I'm your host, Jessica Johnson. If you've ever wondered about how to navigate politics, leadership, and influence as a Christ follower on social media, this episode is for you. Today, I'm sitting down with somebody who embodies countercultural influence in a bold and powerful way, Ron Armstrong. Ron is a passionate leader in our city. He's the founder of Grounds of Grace and sponsored by Grace, and now he is stepping into the political space as a candidate for mayor of Jacksonville. We're going to talk about what it looks like to be an influencer who leads with conviction and grace, how he engages in political discussions online, and how we can live counterculturally in our own lives and our own social media platforms. Here's my conversation with Ron Armstrong. Ron, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming in middle of the day while my son's napping. So it's always helpful when people are so willing to work with my schedule.
I have three. I completely understand.
Yes. I'm sure you remember this stage well.
Absolutely.
How old are your kids now?
So Jubilee's 4, Remington's 6, and Ezekiel's 8.
Wow. I love the name Jubilee ever since I heard it because we're a J family. Jack, Jessica, Jonah, Johnson.
Yeah. Oh gosh, yeah.
Yeah. We want to stick to the J's, and ever since I heard Jubilee, I'm like, oh, that's a good one. And I had never heard anybody else name their daughter Jubilee.
Yeah, it was a good one. It was definitely the Lord's timing in it.
Yes. Well, before we get started, if you suddenly went viral for something totally random, what do you think it would be?
So I brought this up to my wife kind of a week ago, and she was like, absolutely not. So I always wanted to kind of be the next Blippi.
I can see that.
Like come up with my own
outgoing.
Absolutely. Like love on kids, go all over the place. Just be that guy that pops in your school and everybody's like, oh my gosh, it's so-and-so.
Yes.
I mean, freaking Blippi's got a team of people now, billions of dollars, got Mika, like.
Yeah.
So that's probably what I would do.
Yeah. What about, similar question, but also different. If you had to make up a fake, like, influencer niche for yourself, what would that be?
So I think a lot of times in our household, because it's absolutely crazy, I want to just capture just the raw and real stuff. Like the other morning I came in and like there was pee all over our seat.
Oh, wonderful.
And
wait, the toilet seat?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, toilet seat. Let me clarify. And I'm just using the bathroom and you know, I sat down and I'm like, what is this? And then my son was like, yeah, I just peed all over the seat. And I'm like, but why?
Yeah, why?
But I feel like when you catch those moments, or like the other moment when we walk in and our shower is just covered in shaving cream, and I'm getting ready, I'm coming home, it's been a long day, and I walk in and I'm like, for the love of God, I just want to take a hot shower, and I walk into my bathroom and I'm like, what just happened in here? And so like, I don't know.
What did happen in there?
I just went crazy in the shower with all my shaving cream and just was like, let's just have fun with all this. 1, it costs money. 2, Dad's not going to care. And 3, Dad, yeah, he can clean it up.
Yeah.
And he gets out and just
Obviously.
and so like I've always just want to kind of capture those moments of like showing people like, hey, it might look like it's all pretty on the outside, but like it's a twister on the inside sometimes when you have like kids and marriage and all that stuff.
No, absolutely. I mean, that's why you'll probably be able to hear my child in the background of this podcast. I don't know, maybe these mics won't work, but we can hear him yelling
or singing, one of the two.
Yeah, one of those. And so it's good, I think, in a polished world to have that element of realness.
Yeah, we got to quit faking it.
Yeah. Okay, so now that we have had a little bit of fun, I would love if you could share some of your story. And you don't have to tell the whole thing if you don't want to, but give us a bird's eye view.
Yeah, so Dad just got put in rehab a couple weeks ago. You know, he's been an addict my whole life. We had to put him in a facility a couple weeks ago. 64 years old. Mom was the alcoholic. You know, the majority of her life lived in a cardboard box, traveled the streets, was sex trafficked. So that came in the bloodline of my life. So my mom's dad, my dad's dad, the whole generational bloodline was addicts. So it came into my life. I started probably age 13, smoking weed, drinking, sneaking out of the house, you know, doing things I knew I wasn't supposed to be doing. But then really at the age of 14, I got introduced to some really high crime stuff. So one of the examples was I ran with a very known crack dealer of Daytona Beach. Went out, did a lot of things, broke into a lot of places, was experienced to a lot of stuff at a very young age that I probably shouldn't have seen. So then from that lifestyle, 13 all the way up to 25, just lived a life of just reckless living, you know, whatever it was, from drugs, trafficking, skipping school, women, addictions, multiple attempts of suicide, you know, seeing buddies being killed. I mean, I really seen it all. And so lived that lifestyle, and really nothing changed. Made a bunch of money, got everything I wanted, but at the same time was so lost. So I came to Jacksonville, my last job, 2010, lost my job with a very significant position. What I was really good at was working during the day, making really good money, but living my active addiction at night. And so when I lost my job in Hamlet, North Carolina, didn't have anything, you know, lost all my toys, lost the house, didn't have any money in my bank account, and so got picked up on a Navy contract here in Jacksonville, 2010, came here, $5 in my name, got a apartment off of Hodges Boulevard, and, you know, went to work and did really well and started managing some large projects. But I didn't know anybody here, but I also was so lost. My active addiction was still happening, going on all the beach bars and, you know, doing all the wrong things still. But it was one day in 2011, my crane operator on top of a United States destroyer flight deck, he came up after he was working for me and he says, "Hey man," he said, "I just want to invite you to church." And I've never been a part of any kind of church or, you know, didn't know what it meant.
Yeah.
So he was like, "Hey man, let me just pick you up one Sunday, we'll go." And I was kind of the life of the party, so we would party hard on the weekends. And then he showed up one Sunday after, you know, we'd been out all night and quite honestly probably was hungover. And he's like, "Hey man, we're going to church." And I was like, "All right, whatever." And then literally in 2000 and end of 2010, coming into 11, walked into Beach United in Jax Beach. And I'll just never forget, like, you know, the guy I still talk to, his name is David. He opened the door. He said, "Hey, man, welcome in." And he just came up and gave me just this huge hug. And I was like, this is weird. And so we went in, heard the service. And this is back when Joby Martin was planting 1122, and it just freshly got started. And he gave the gospel invitation. And it was one of those bold invitations of, like, at the end of the service, like, hey, if you just need a restart, like, you know, there is grace. And it just was like something for me to stand up in the middle of service. And so, which I knew was the Holy Spirit now, I just kind of just stood up. And then when I stood up, like, it just felt like the Spirit of God just came over me because I just started sweating. I was really nervous. And my buddy next to me was like, "Dude, are you okay?" And I was like, "I don't know what's going on." And he was like, "Okay." But I knew it was the God that he grabbed my life then. And so, you know, that's when I surrendered.
Can I ask, was your heart already softened to the idea of God before? Like, was Jesus or God any part of your life at all? Like, did your parents believe or anything like that? Or was this a completely new thing when you heard that gospel invitation and when you walked into that church?
Yeah, it was new for me. My mom just came out of a rehab. She got saved on the back porch of her rehab facility in West Palm. And she started telling me about Jesus. I had no understanding, had no teaching, had no discipleship of it. So I didn't really know who he was, who God was, but I just knew in that moment something was different.
Yeah.
And so I was just like, okay, what do we do now? You know, here I am publicly surrendering my life to Jesus. I need a new fresh start. And then I just thought like everything was going to get easier, and, you know, you surrender your life, it's like rainbows, butterflies, all that kind of stuff. And it just went completely opposite from, you know, then I was diagnosed with a type of cancer. My dad was struggling real bad. We lost some people in our family. And I was like, honestly, this sucks. But God was just continually pursuing me. And, you know, over the next, 15 years, my whole life changed.
How did that shape everything that you have started today?
Yeah, so Sponsored by Grace came in 2018, and it came from taking an international mission trip to Brazil with Compassion International. So when 1122 launched into the old Walmart, their first trip was to Cado, Brazil, their first Compassion trip. And I was like, hey, we sponsor a kid. At this time I was single, and I was like, I want to go on that trip. And so I signed up, and my kid was Ronaldo, and I was like, man, this is very exciting. I'm going to get to meet my kid and raise the money. Next thing you know, we're on a trip and we're on a plane, and then, you know, my now wife was on that trip, and I was like in the airport looking at her, and I was just like, man, this is wild. Like, you know, we started dating, and on that trip, I told her I was going to marry her, and I was like, what are you doing, Ron? And you know, next thing you know, we get married.
So you didn't propose, but you told her.
I just told her. I was like, I'm gonna marry you one day.
And something similar.
Did he?
It's fun. Mm-hmm.
And so she looked at me like I was crazy. And so, long story short, it was meet my kid, Ronaldo, spent time with him, came back home, worked for the church for a couple years, and then 2018, I look over and his picture was on our fridge, and I was like, you know, Compassion's a 1-point-something billion organization sponsoring millions of kids through this program. But what about kids in local poverty, like in our local backyard? What are we doing for them? And so that's how it kind of launched in from there.
And was Grounds of Grace born out of that?
It was.
Tell me about that.
So 2021, I heard a word from a local mother in Jacksonville, and she said, you know, Mr. Ron, the streets are always hiring. You know, our kids are dying every day on this side of town. They don't have any outlets. We don't have any jobs. So I just took that and said, okay, well, how can we be different? And so 2021, I was driving home, and I drove past a car lot on Mayport Road, and there was this big white bus. And, you know, now I know that God has given me a gift of, you know, being an entrepreneur and seeing visions and just bringing those visions to life. So I went home and I thought about it, and I didn't even really tell my wife. And then next thing you know, I show up at our front doorstep, and I have a 30-foot old school bus sitting in our front yard.
That's something my husband would do.
And she about killed me. She's like, what are you doing?
You just bought it?
Yeah, just got $5,000, went over and bought it and said, hey, we're going to, because the background was thrift store. So I was thinking, let's turn this into a mobile thrift store.
Yes.
The community is going to love it. And long story short, the community hated the idea. And they were like, we don't want that. And so I'm a believer now, working in communities like we are, you've got to, you know, you got to poll the community. You got to ask the community before you actually do something. Hey, what are your thoughts about this? Like, do a survey. And no one liked it. And I was like, crap, I already bought the bus. And so from there, I met a buddy who owned a coffee shop, and he said, hey man, you need to turn that into a mobile coffee bus. And then from there, met a young lady named Chantel who started a coffee bus business here in Jacksonville. And you know, through seeing what they were doing in the margins, I was like, man, like this could be cool. And so it took about, 4 or 5 months, and raised the money within the community, and we turned it into the mobile unit that we have now. And so like year one, it was $60,000 that it did, and we were like, oh my gosh, we made $60,000. And then year two, it did 120, so it immediately doubled. And then we started employing our kids, and you know, then from there, it was building a coffee company, which now we have 5 locations and doing what we do.
What would you say are some of the hardest parts about doing what you do?
I think the hardest part is people don't realize what goes into the business every single day. I'm a believer now, even in ministry, every ministry is a business. Because if you don't treat it as a business, like your doors can close overnight if you're not managing your books, you know, managing your people right, the product, the inventory. There's so many things that go on behind the scenes that people don't realize. A lot of people just want to, you know, receive a check, go home, show up the next day, and that's great. But when it comes to your business, your idea, your vision, your mission, like you just can't clock out at 5 o'clock and go to bed. Like you live the business.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times it becomes very exhausting, especially when you start running $1 million operations, and then you're touching things every second. Yeah. And so it can become challenging.
What's a daily challenge that you face?
Daily challenge in our community and the work that we do is not necessarily seeing the fruit. So ministry, business, you want to see your KPIs, your return on investment. You know, maybe if it's not happening in a day, but at least in a week, you want to see, hey, is this working? Are we making money? But when you don't start seeing that for weeks, months, and even years, you really start getting in your head, like, am I even doing anything? Like literally I was talking to my staff the other day, and I was like, is this even working? And then you get a message or you get a phone call, And like the message I just got yesterday driving home, and the lady messages me, she's like, hey, I don't know if you're going through something, but I just want you to know, like, I appreciate you being in this community and blah, 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 blah. And you're like, okay, even if it's a message, we keep going.
Yes.
So.
Yes. Do you ever get afraid?
No.
How?
I think the only thing that I get afraid about is leaving my family, because the reality is the area that we work in, the things that we do. I mean, just the recent homicide we had, there was 60 bullets that were flying everywhere.
Were you in the area at the time?
No, we just got there. So body was being picked up. People are screaming. People are crying. You know, windows are busted out from gunshots. So we just missed it. So we're there on the after end of things. But the reality is, you know, the 5 days a week that we're in this community, you know, we've been there when it has happened. So it could take a stray bullet. It could be an argument around the corner at an apartment. You walk into it, and next thing you know, your life is taken by a stray bullet. You know, I've had the death threats from the community. I've had a lot of emotional challenges just from people, you know, being cussed out, threatening you. But the reality of, like, you just never know. And I think it's the reality also for people living a normal life is, like, you're not guaranteed tomorrow.
Yeah.
But when you have kids, you're just like, man, like, if I die today, like, you know, my kids.
How does your wife handle that? Does that make her nervous at all, or does she feel the same way as you?
Yeah, she, you know, I think at the very beginning was the hardest part. Here is my husband. We have a family. He's going into a war zone in the backyard of our city every single week. But I think we've gotten to the point now in our marriage where she just trusts me and she trusts the Lord. But, you know, when I tell her, hey, we're on lockdown, like the last one we just had, we were on lockdown in the community. I couldn't get out. You know, they surrounded the whole apartment. So you can only imagine when you're calling your wife saying, hey, we're on lockdown. You don't know what's happening. You don't know if the gunman's still in the community, you know, because they still haven't caught him. And so there's a lot of challenges, but I think we're so strong in our beliefs now where we just like, hey, you can lose your life in the ministry that you're doing. I can lose my life in the ministry I'm doing. Let's just enjoy what we have right now, trust the Lord, and, you know, move forward.
That's so good. And that's a very countercultural way to live. Because in a way, we live in a very self-protecting world. And I struggle with this even. I think social media has definitely played a role in some of that, in the sense of, just like everybody else, I want to be as healthy as I can. I want to take care of myself. I think stewardship of your body is good. But what if you're not careful, you'll see people trying to essentially live as long as they can and stay away from all danger. Like that cake is going to kill you. You know where I'm going with this? And yet the Bible tells us the opposite.
Yeah.
And it's a lot harder to live out, though, in real life and put yourself on the line like that. So what does countercultural influence mean to you?
Yeah, it's challenging in the world we live in today. You know, I have to be very careful because the work that God has called me to do is going to be completely different than the work He has called you to do.
Yeah.
And a lot of times you can get in positions where you start judging other people, like, why are you not doing this?
I struggle with that so hard. Sorry, keep going.
And it can become a very dangerous and dark place because you're just like raising your hands, you're sending emails, you then start getting on social media, and then your mouth becomes a non-Christian. You're like starting to point fingers, and you're just like, why are you not helping these people? You're a Christian, blah, 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 or whatever the category may be. And I fell into that trap because, you know, what we do, it's just like we're waving flags over in our community saying, like, to the local church or the believers, like, we need your help. Like, the only way that this is going to change is by the local church, believers coming over in communities like ours and saying, hey, the gospel can change your life and it can change this community. But the reality is, like, we have 7 churches on the same road and no one's coming. And so, you know, the culture we live in today, I think you're absolutely right, is if you open your Bible and read it and you take it seriously, you can't just stay still. Like, there is a call to action to what we're supposed to do. Is it cute, like coming into Bible studies and, you know, being in God's Word and being in fellowship with other believers? Absolutely, and I think it's necessary. But it's when you leave that group, what are you actually doing? Just like on Sundays in churches. Like, we have right now in Jacksonville over 2,000 churches. So right now, 500,000 people are walking through a church every single Sunday in Jacksonville. But what if that's the case, why is our city so far behind? Why are we struggling? Why are we the murder capital of cities in the United States right now? Why do we have such a poverty issue? Why are we, you know, our abortion rates up? Like, there's so many things that the local church or the Christian believer should be stepping into. But it really just comes down, you know, what is the Holy Spirit leading you and I to do? And we have to be obedient to that. So,
but at the same time, there is an element of your job where you want people to understand. How do you find the balance of knowing that ultimately they should do what they're called to do, but at the same time, you want them to understand the importance and the weight of what's happening?
yeah, you do. You want to share the stories. You want to share the needs. You want to invite them to be a part of the things that you're doing. But ultimately, it comes down, you know, we're going into year 8, and I have literally seen churches that come in that want the photo opportunity. You see churches that come in and literally saying, oh, can we take this back on Sunday and broadcast it on our screen and say we did something great this weekend? And it's just those things that I think have damaged the community more than actually have done good. And so what I have learned in almost 8 years is if you can't be consistent, don't do it at all. And there are times where people come in and they're so excited to see the work that's being done in the city, something like us.
It's fine.
And
that might happen a couple times.
And, you know, you see them so excited to come in, and then you kind of look over and they're like taking their photos and their pictures and, you know, smiling, and then you never see them again. Well, what we have to deal with is the kid coming up and saying, Mr. Ron, where was Miss Ashley at? And it's like, I'm sorry, bud, she, you know, you don't have anything to say because, you know, Miss Ashley's not coming back anymore. And as a child, you're just like, how much does that happen before you really get tired of it? So, but it looks
and
different.
They're probably so used to, I mean, I could be wrong, actually, I don't know. But maybe they're used to people in their lives anyways not being the most consistent. So they look to you for that consistency.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I had Tammy Taunton from
I watched that one.
And similar, that if you're going to commit, like, commit.
Yeah.
Because that's really what's going to build the relationships
Yep.
over time. And that's what you need.
Yep.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So in today's culture, it's not necessarily... hold on, let me reword that. In today's culture on social media, it's not often easy to stand firm on your faith. Luckily, we live in the United States, so we are safe in a lot of ways, which is why I changed my wording. But as a business owner and a leader, how do you stay firm in your faith? Because sometimes you see stories of if you don't agree with somebody's values as a business owner, you get canceled. Has that affected your businesses at all? And how do you push through that?
It has not affected our business because the way that my stance is, you know, even in the businesses, we'll take the coffee company, for example.
Yeah.
We have a very diverse group of people working for us.
Yeah.
You know, we have people that are bisexual, we have people that are gay, we have people that are Christians, we have people that are white, black, purple, orange. We have everything under the sun. And I think it's beautiful. You know, somebody came to me the other day and they were like, Ron, I thought you were supposed to hire all Christians. I was like, yeah, I think if I did that, it would actually make it worse.
Right.
And they kind of looked at me because they were a Christian. I was like, you just don't understand. Like, I've been in that arena. I know what it feels like. I know what it tastes like. I've seen behind the curtain. And sometimes there's a lot of good that comes out of that, but my heart was, I want people who don't know Jesus to be in the environments that I'm in.
Yeah.
And even if they don't believe what I believe, I want them to see something that's different in the average Christian or Jesus follower.
Have you ever had any of your employees or volunteers come to know the Lord through all?
We're getting there. Yeah. We've had one staff member be baptized so far. We've had some great conversations where people, believe in the scientific realm, or we have people that we've had some great conversations, but this is the type of work now where you're planting seeds that are going to be produced over time, not overnight.
Right.
And a lot of people don't want, in the Christian world, a lot of people don't want to wait. And so we're getting there. And I think, what I'm known for is, because of the work that's being done, I'm the first one that will probably stand on the front line and say, look, it's not right. I don't agree with what everyone's doing when it comes to a church, an individual Christian. Perfect example, I got invited a couple weeks ago. Hamburger Mary's opened up, and over by one of our partner coffee shops.
And they moved.
They did. So they're Murray Hill now.
Yeah.
And they wanted to introduce me to the owner. And I said, absolutely. I would love to meet him. And the guy looked at me. He's like, yeah, but you're a Christian. And I'm like, yeah, that's the problem. Is you guys are just already canceling people out because they're associated with something that you don't agree with. But you're not thinking about, well, what if that conversation leads to another conversation? And that conversation leads to, now somebody's actually thinking about what it means to actually know this Jesus guy. So it becomes very different.
Yeah, absolutely. You gave a really good picture of your background and the things that you came from. Do you ever feel the voice of the enemy trying to disqualify you?
Oh, every day. Yeah.
What do you do with that? How do you shut it down?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, because I still struggle with that, is when you have such a horrific past and you've done everything in that window of decades of stuff, you've seen everything, you've been a part of everything, you just did it all. It was almost like, I should have been a part of that story, in the Bible where it talks about where they were crucifying babies and people were doing all this crazy stuff. I remember going to Israel. I was like, man, I should have been in that cave doing the same stuff. But the challenge I have now as a young man, a father, a husband, a leader in the community is it is almost every day the enemy is trying to come in there and whisper some kind of lie to get me to do something. And there have been real life now opportunities where I've been placed in positions, or I'd get a phone call, or I'd ride by a certain place, and the enemy would be like, hey, just try it. Just do it. See what happens. You can have fun. And so literally what all I've found is the quicker I can get out of my mind, out of that situation, the quicker it goes away.
Yeah.
And the only thing that I have found that has worked is just start speaking Jesus, start speaking scripture. And then because in the moment, it's so exciting. It's like this adrenaline pill, man, what if I actually went back and did that? You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
But when I come out of it, I'm like, why was I even thinking about that?
Yeah.
So it's weird.
What about, I don't know if you ever struggle with this, but even me trying to, that would be my phone.
I love how it's just so
yeah, slow-mo. I don't know if you ever struggle with this, but for me, even with starting this, I'm still trying to figure out what this is, this ministry, this podcast. Sometimes I get this voice in my head that's like, you're just making this all up. I don't know. Have you ever questioned if it was the Lord?
Oh, all the time. Yeah, I still, to this day, been following Jesus now for over a decade. I've never heard his voice. And I always question, okay, God, are you in this? Is this me? Am I trying to get some special attention out of this? And you constantly just have to lay yourself down in humility and say, if there's anything in here that needs to be stripped out, you got to do it, because I will jack this thing up.
Yeah.
And we both know that.
Yeah.
we want those moments. We want the recognition. We want, the success. I mean, we're human.
Yeah.
And I think because of that and, what has happened in the garden, we have those moments where we want to win. We want to. So I think the challenge is asking God, can you just make it a little bit more clear? Can you show me some fruit? Can you send somebody with confirmation? Can you show me that there's a need for this? And then that's when it happens. You're like, you get a phone call, you get a text, you get an encouragement. Like,
so true.
You just sitting here talking about it. It's like, I'm trying to think of who else is doing what you're doing when it talks about, talking about these things in the world we live in as young individuals. I don't know nobody. So which means to me, like, somebody's got to shed the light.
That was encouraging.
There you go. You get one.
Thank you. Yeah. I have a notebook that when I was feeling just really attacked the other day, and I just took out a notebook and I started going through all the text messages that I've gotten from people. I've gone through like my DMs, things I remember people told me, and I just started writing them all down. So I have a place I can be like, when I'm doubting, I go, people have confirmed.
Yep.
Here's what I got.
Yep. Yep.
And it's helping.
Yep.
So I want to
Praise
write
God.
that down.
Praise God.
Yeah. Okay. You, like you said, you have you're not necessarily an emotional person, and that's probably bodes well for certain things. I've took a brief scroll through your social media, and you'll post things that can get potentially comments that could start.
Potentially.
Yeah. That could start an argument maybe among people, and their opinions will differ. And there's a lot of people that struggle with posting something political or that could lead to a political conversation without it necessarily turning into a fight. What advice do you have for believers who want to be more outspoken about certain things I particularly am trying to stick to social media in this conversation, but, real life could apply still. But, what advice do you have for believers who want to contribute to these conversations, but maybe they're afraid of the division?
So I'm a believer, so my wife would say it. A lot of people have told me in the past, like, you just got to stay off social media. Like, you like to stir things up. But I'm a believer that God has created social media for a platform. And when I say that, people are like, oh, what do you mean by that? And I'm just like, well, these platforms that are created, I think it's a tool for communication. Now, how you communicate, that means everything. You start getting on there dropping F-bombs and cussing people out and saying so-and-so's a piece of crap. Like, okay, we get that. Like, we know there's a heart issue there.
Yeah.
But when it comes down to talking about like really hard stuff or, disagreements or, this is my belief, I think it's appropriate to talk about those things, but you just got to be prepared for what's coming.
Absolutely. And for you, like we were saying, you need to share the things that are happening in the communities that you work with. Otherwise, how are people going to know?
Yeah.
And we live in the digital age, and what a gift it is that you can press post and it's going to reach so many more people than you just trying to spread it word of mouth, person to person. And so it's very helpful to your mission if you steward it well.
Yeah, I would agree. And, it's, I remember one guy, a pastor, told me this one day. He's like, you're not going to get anywhere posting stuff like you post. And I was like, okay. And so, here we are.
What does he mean by getting anywhere?
Like in leadership, and he was taking it as like you're putting too much of your personal business out there. And ever since we've had social media, I used it since I've gotten saved. I was like, this is a ministry platform for me. And so now I look back at that conversation, that was 5 years ago, and we have reached more people through our mission and our upcoming stuff now than I can ever imagine.
Yeah.
So I think the bottom line is you have to be prepared for what's coming. And how to navigate that.
Yeah.
Perfect example, I just posted something this past weekend. I love going highlighting people around the city. So good people, good places, good missions. And I posted somewhere we went out to dinner and it was good food and it just opened up at the beach. And then one guy just posted something, he private messaged me and he was like, you're all about yourself and you left me and just had a really angry attitude. And my response was like, hey man, I'm so sorry you're feeling like that. Let's grab coffee. And a lot of times when we hear those conversations, we want to stay as far away from them as possible. But I just dove right in and said, hey man, something's going on here. Let's just get together. And unfortunately, his response was like, no, I'm good, man. Have a great day. But I know I had to engage.
Still disarmed.
Absolutely. Like, hey man, like something's going on. Let's talk about it. So, but if you're not emotionally prepared to have those conversations, I think it could go really south very quick.
So that was the perfect transition for my next question. So how do you respond typically if somebody, I don't know, misrepresented your views or took it out of context or what you meant? Like maybe you actually posted something super encouraging.
Yeah.
And you thought, how could somebody possibly take this the wrong way?
Oh yeah.
But they do.
Yeah, so like another post that just recently went out was I took a picture of, there was two homeless guys. I was driving, I was at a stoplight, and one of them shared a needle with another guy. Took whatever was in that needle. As soon as he did it, you could just see the guy just kind of slump over. And it was like, I don't know if this guy just died or if he had an overdose or if it was just like he was out of it. So after calling, like paramedics and stuff, well, this one guy went on there and was like, great job of making it about yourself. And I was like, oh, okay. So I messaged him and I said, hey man, like, am I missing something here? Like, all I'm trying to do is bring awareness to what we're talking about, that we have an issue with overdoses in the city of Jacksonville and it's happening right here. And I was like, hey, I can come by. Like, let's have a conversation. Yeah. And then same thing is like, no, I'm all good.
Like so some people do prefer to stay behind a screen.
They do. And, I look at that sometimes as a cowardly approach is like, if you're going to engage with some kind of emotional feeling that's going to tend for me to give you a reaction and a call for action, I want to engage with you.
Yeah.
But a lot of times, especially the world we live in today, there's so much trauma behind the scene, people want to attack. But I'm the type of guy that I want to engage rather than trying to attack.
No, that's really good. Sometimes if I've ever received some sort of negative comment on a video, I try to bless them on the way out. And it does tend to disarm because they came out with an attack. And then when you don't attack back, sometimes they backtrack and they're like, oh, that's actually not really what I meant.
So where were you trying to get in the beginning with this?
Yeah, it's very interesting. This one I struggle with. How do you handle criticism from other Christians?
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
That's hard because there's people that I truly respect, and I want their respect. Like deep down, my pride's like, oh, I still want you to respect me too. But I'm sure you get a handful of people who might disagree with the way that you do things or what you're posting.
Leadership is very lonely at the top. So when you look around at your influence of people, who are they? And do you give them permission to speak into your life? Anybody outside of that, I don't give a lot of room to. So if I start receiving criticism from different pastors throughout the city or one-time conversations, I'll listen. But I'm not truly taking it to heart because, one, we don't have a relationship. Two, we're not doing life together. And three, we're not even serving each other in the way that, like, not that I don't respect you, I just, we're on two different playing fields. Perfect example, a pastor calls me one time, and this is before Sponsored by Grace was really what it is now. And he just kind of gave me this, cold shoulder, and he was like, you're really not going to make anything out of this. It's just a hobby, right? And I was like, no, like, I'm seriously on a mission to, like, impact a community. He's like, oh, well, get back to me when you raise $60,000. And I was like, okay. And so when I came back and said, hey, I raised 60 grand, he was like, you did what? I was like, yeah, I told you, like, I'm putting everything into this. And then it was like, oh, well, I really don't have time for that right now. And I was like, what? So I had to be very careful now who I let in my life because there's a lot of talk out there in today's world, especially when you get to the place of, like, you've made it. And then people want to give you their feedback. And it's like, where were you at the last 10 years? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. So what I hear you saying is there's Christians and leaders that you put into your life that you openly will take their constructive criticism. But just because somebody is a leader and and is a believer doesn't necessarily mean that they get a place to speak into your life.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's hard too, because not everybody is going to understand or buy into your vision. Like, I'm sure there's somebody that's going to watch my stuff and go, I don't get it. I think social media is the worst and we should get rid of it. And this is, I have to be able to take that and go, okay, maybe this ministry is not for you.
Well, it's like you can take Elon Musk or whatever his name is, and he can say, hey, you need to build Cybertrucks for your community for security. And I'm going to look at that and like, dude, that's the stupidest idea I've ever heard. And he's a billionaire.
It works the other way.
Yeah, exactly. And it's so...
there's things I'm not going to be on board with other people.
Right.
But God is not, for some reason, God has not given that to me to really be a part of.
Yeah, it's always the greatest line from somebody to say is, well, God told me. And I'm like, he didn't tell me that.
Yeah. No, that's good. So how do we have these tough conversations on social media without pushing people away? Or maybe it's going to push some people away.
Sure.
What are your thoughts?
You got to create a space. I don't think it is a ongoing conversation because it's something there that is, in front of everybody. So if you feel like the Spirit is leading you to have a conversation with a certain person or a group of people, I think our responsibility is to engage them with like, hey, let's meet. Let's talk about this. Where is this coming from? And finding out the root cause. Developing a platform or a space where we're just attacking each other. One, I don't think it's biblical. And then two, I don't think we're making any progress.
Yeah.
But the challenge we have in today's world is literally there's no space for that. Like, we just do what we want to do, when we want to do it, attack who we want to attack. And we don't create anywhere for people to come together and say, hey, I don't agree with that. And, okay, why don't you agree with that? And talk through it. So I think it's always going to be an ongoing challenge on how you navigate that.
Yeah. How have you been able to create community through your social media?
I think it's people just coming in contact with me and saying, hey, either I follow you, I've agreed with this conversation, or I have disagreed. And it has given us opportunity to talk about it.
Yeah.
And I think when people realize, like, it's okay to disagree. We can still love each other, but I don't have to agree with what you're doing, and you don't have to agree with what I'm doing. But at the end of the day, you're a believer, I'm a believer, or, vice versa. You're a non-believer, I'm a believer. And, it's okay.
Yeah.
Like last conversation with one of my managers is she hates Donald Trump. And I looked at her and I said, look, I don't like the guy either. Like, I believe in some things he's doing, but I don't believe in a lot of things he's doing. And she was like, well, I think it's about going into abortions. I think it's up to us, as women to choose what we want to do with our bodies. And I looked right at her and I said, you're right. Okay. You get to choose whatever you want to do, but I am pro-life. And she's like, okay. And we were like, okay. And we went and walked the other way. And we're like, okay, see you tomorrow.
Yeah, I like you. You're still a person I want to be around.
Yeah. We still work together. It's like, okay. And I think a lot of times people are looking for, I'm going to convert you right now.
Right.
To believe or think or feel the way I do. So you can be on my team. Rather than just saying, hey, okay, we disagreed. I still love you.
Yeah. And ultimately, that kind of thing will only really happen through relationship.
100%.
Like, if you want someone to come to know the Lord, it's, for the most part, it's typically not going to happen from just one conversation. It could.
Sure.
It really could.
Sure.
It could plant the seed,
Sure.
absolutely. But, it's like with what you're doing, the reason you guys show up all the time, every week, is because that relational bank, that trust builds over time, and that's what ultimately opens the door.
Yeah, that's what wins.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And one thing that really stood out to me about what you said is that you will, because my question was about community and how you build that, is that you will actually invite that person, like, hey, we're having a disagreement, you're like, cool, let's go have coffee, let's get to know each other.
Yeah.
And that, if some people might say no, but there's probably a lot of people that say yes, and you do, and now you are building community. This person's like, oh, I had no idea, and
That's right.
now we're friends. And I think that's really a valuable thing to share.
Yeah,
So
I agree.
Thank you for that. Okay, so this is also all leading up to something here. Yeah. Tell us what you're doing.
Yeah, so, big exciting news. I'm running for the mayor of Jacksonville. Been a lot of behind the scenes work for the last couple of months, but now that I have this relationship with Jesus, I can kind of tell when the Holy Spirit is doing something. And so 5 months ago, mowing the grass, I just heard clear as day the word mayor, and I was like, well, this is weird. I know nothing about politics. I heard nothing but bad news about it, and I don't want to get anywhere near it. But then God just started putting words and initiatives, and so then he just told me, he's like, this is not about winning or trying to beat anybody. This is a deployment, once again, of the gospel. And here we go, of bringing the gospel into politics, like absolutely not heard of. Different world, different scenes, different people. But yeah, he led me to do it. So we put our name in the hat, about a month ago, and have a team of people. We just went off, on social media, soft launch. And so, yeah, it's out there now. And it's like, I look at it last night and I was like, holy cow, this is actually happening.
How do you think being countercultural, or as I would call it, upside down, how does that play into all of this? Because you listed out your background, you listed out your history, and from on paper, you don't qualify.
Yeah.
How does that play into this? Do you think, is that a major part of the way you're going about this? Is like, yeah, I don't fit the bill, which is why this might work.
And that's funny because that's what everybody's saying. They're like, dude, if you won, like, this would break history.
It would be amazing.
But I think that's part of it. Once again, going back to the world we live in, we're so quick to hide the pain and fake it.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be the guy that fakes it. I want to be real. I want to be honest, and I want people to know, like, look, I should have been dead. I should have been in prison, but God.
Yeah.
And if he can do it for me, he can do it for you. And I think a lot of times people just get so isolated in fear. Like, how would God use such a man like me or a woman like me? Or, I have such a background. Or even if it's not a background, it's just like, I'm really good at this idea, but I don't know if I can do it. Like, even if I didn't win, hopefully it just tells a story like, man, you remember that young guy that ran for mayor and had a beautiful family and did it the right way and, loves the Lord, and you remember that guy? And hopefully somebody will be like, man, I did it because of him. Like,
I love that.
And so those are the stories actually that are unraveling already. Like, man, thank you for your boldness. Thank you for your courage. We just had a city official.
It might actually, even if you didn't win, it actually might be setting the stage for a person who's going to come after you.
100%.
And that goes.
The next Billy Graham.
Yeah. You never know who sees that step of faith and goes, I can too.
I've met 3 people so far who said, man, I was thinking about running for mayor. And my response to them is, why haven't you? And one was a 20-year-old kid, one was a business owner, and one was a female. And my hope is, like, maybe they see this as, man, if Ron can do this, like, I can do it. And so I think we have just attached so much to the political world, where you have to wear a suit and tie, you have to look this certain way, you have to have this background, you have to be working for political agendas for so many years. But who made up those rules?
Yeah.
Man?
Yeah, absolutely. It was man made it up. Yeah, I think that's so encouraging. I was just reading the story of Gideon in the Bible, and his was a little different because he was like hiding from danger. But God did just call him a warrior when he found Gideon, and just called him to something bigger. And I was like, wow, like at any point, God just is like, I'm going to use who I'm going to use. And he just showed up and said to you while you were mowing the lawn, mayor.
It's the same thing kind of with you, is like, he's put something on your heart. You've raised your hand and said, okay, Lord, I'm here. You're doing it.
Yeah.
I think it's just the challenge a lot of times with people is we want to raise our hand, but we never want to say, okay, Lord, I'm ready. Here I am. And then you go backwards and say, whatever the excuse is. So
we're going to go back to whatever feels safe.
100%. You know, one thing that I do believe that, you know, one of the pastors that, you know, I look up to with Joby is he's got this saying that says, if the tomb is empty, anything is possible. And, you know, you can put that tagline to a lot of things and it can become kind of cliche, but the reality is the tomb is empty and anything is possible. And so my inspiration to other people that are looking, that are watching, that want to get into it is like, hey, this is really hard work. But if you're willing and you've been called to do it, like nothing can stop it.
Well, we're running out of time, so we're just going to wrap up with a couple of questions here. How can the everyday person, someone who isn't necessarily a business owner or a politician, still be a countercultural, or as I call it, an upside down influencer in their own space?
I think if you're willing, you just have to stir up the status quo. Our world is moving in a direction that everybody just feels like, hey, we're just jumping on this train and going with the train. But if you're going to flip the thing upside down, you got to look at like, how can you do that in the most God-honoring way? Because I think the difference we can fall into is you can do it in a non-God-honoring way, and there's a lot of repercussions for that. Or you can do it in a God-honoring way where it brings glory to Him, and that's not going to be easy, so be prepared for the cost that comes with it.
And where can people find you, connect with Grounds of Grace, sponsored by Grace, and follow along with your campaign journey? Yeah,
so sponsored by Grace, you can go to www.sponsoredbygrace.org. That's the nonprofit foundation. Grounds of Grace is www.groundsofgracejax.com. That's the coffee company and the locations. And then with the campaign for Run for Mayor, it's theronarmstrong.com. You can jump on there, look at the site, find some ways to get plugged in, and if you want to follow on the journey, jump on.
Well, thank you for coming and listening to my crying baby in the background for a majority of this interview. So,
absolutely.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Thank you for listening. I invite you to connect with us on our social media channels at Upside Down Influencer on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and YouTube. Upside Down Influencer is produced by 514 Productions, music by Jason Cooper, and website by Metal Marketing.